So for the Ukrainians themselves, many of them have become wartime refugees, and we can make the argument that they might qualify as asylum seekers, right? Hey, we had to get the hell out of there. So there were 5 million. They had gone to Hungary and Poland mostly, but some to Romania, Slovakia, and Moldova. You think you could find Moldova on a map there, Justin Ellick? Probably not. Most people have no idea where that is. But the fact is they fled there, and some decided, hey, let's do the hop, skip, and a jump. The preferred location in Europe, Western Europe, naturally is Germany, or England, or France. And if not that, you have the trifecta, the trinity, the troika of choices, which is the United States. And I remember right after the invasion by the T-2 tanks of Putin and the resilience of the Ukrainians to hold the line and push them back, that there were a number, in fact, thousands of Ukrainians who had made their way all the way to the border that separates the United States from Mexico, especially on the Texas side. And because they were Ukrainians and because they did have paperwork, and some of them have skills, superior skills to some of the illegals that are coming across the border now claiming that they are asylum seekers, some of them computer programmers, teachers, nurses, bringing skill levels, they were granted a humanitarian parole. I like the way they say it. You're paroled into the country. And for some of these asylum seekers, as they're called, undocumented aliens, I call them migrants, illegal aliens, they may not see a federal judge to determine if their status, in fact, qualifies for potential citizenship in the United States and for them to stay as asylum seekers, upwards of 7 years. But something happened in the first few months, and I've been talking about this a lot, Justin Ellick, as you know. I've been saying, where did all the Ukrainians go? I've been at a lot of the migrant shelters, the brick and mortar ones that the mayor has requisitioned around the city to house these visitors of his. We didn't ask for them. He not only asked for them, he rolled out the red carpet and gave them 5-star top-shelf treatment with our tax dollars. But I've been going from shelter to shelter, from the tents out in Creedmoor to the tents in Randall's Island, and boy, that's a cabal. 3,000 single able-bodied young men of military age with nothing to do, nowhere to go, most of them Venezuelans, and you might as well be on Rikers Island because the gangs rule out there. They're divided into three, the strongest being the Venezuelans, then the North Africans from the sub-Saharan countries that spend $18,000 to come to Mexico City, and then with Coyote's help, work their way up to the border, one toe over, and they're in the United States, and they want to come to New York. Mali, Mauritania, Chad, Sudan, Senegal, and way down Madagascar on the lower east coast of Africa, many of them having active ISIS and Al-Qaeda cells. How crazy that is. But the point being is that these Ukrainians, they were allowed in first. And then all of a sudden, they had to abide by what they call the U4U program, which meant they had to have sponsors. Now, wait a second. I don't understand this. And this is where we're going to do the deep dive next week with Nancy, who joins me Tuesdays and Thursdays. Why do Ukrainians fleeing a war with Russia that has leveled some of those villages, I mean, just wasted them the way they did in World War II and World War I. Why is it that a Ukrainian wartime refugee, truly seeking asylum, many of them with skill levels that we need, they're not going to be Grubhub delivery guys or gals, how come somewhere in that pipeline, that process, in the first few months, when they were making their way to Mexico City and making their way up to the border, separating ourselves, Texas from Mexico, and then to parts unknown, why is the U4U program in effect for them where they have to get sponsors? That's right. Everyone that comes in from the Ukraine needs a sponsor, like so many of your grandparents, great-grandparents, and those who came even before them. Sponsor. Sponsor would show up at Ellis Island, which was closed 1954, which was when I was birthed. But prior to that, you show up at Ellis Island. You had to have a friend or a family member here who would show up at Ellis Island and say, I will take full responsibility for this family, for the children. I will make sure that the rent is paid wherever they find a place to live, that they have food, that they have clothes on their back. Because particularly back in the 20s and 30s, there was no social service. There was no welfare. You had to go it alone. I know that happened with your grandparents, great-grandparents. It happened with my grandparents on my Italian side, the Bade side, my mother, Francesca, Fidela, and Nicoletta Bianchino. They had to have a sponsor. My grandfather, Anton, who was coming from Poland after working in Liverpool as a master craftsman, having been trained in Krakow. He came out of the town of Limanova. He was building the cabins on the ocean cruises, earned his way over to Ellis Island. He said, where are you going? Where do you have sponsors? He said, Chicago. He showed him the paperwork because he had family and he had contacts from Limanova. You had to have sponsors. Why is it that the only ones who have to have sponsors now are probably the only ones who would truly prove that they are wartime refugees and asylum seekers? What a joke, with people walking right across the border. Now no Ukrainian immigrant can come through the southern border. It cannot go through Eagle Pass in Texas or any of the other portals where you just say you're an asylum seeker, because they'll say, no, you're Ukrainian, you got to have a U4U application. And they're slowing down the process now. L'Immigrant, Immigration and Naturalization Service, ICE and Customs. You ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, who more than the Ukrainians, whether you support or continued support of Zelensky and his war against Putin or not, you can certainly make the case that they are legitimate wartime refugees, they are asylum seekers, and most importantly, unlike most of the other migrants, illegal aliens coming in, they have skill levels, so they can assimilate a lot more quickly. Many of them speak English, assimilate and work jobs in the white-collar sector that we need filled. There's only so many people who can be delivering your Grubhub food. That's what most of these migrants do now. What a mess. You heard it first here from yours truly, Curtis Sliwa. Nancy is going to continue to do the deep dive. Why the double standard for Ukrainian wartime refugees, asylum seekers, and everyone else just gets to walk in as long as they put one toe into the United States. Then Catholic Charities is there to take them the rest of the way at taxpayers' expense. Taxpayers' expense.